Let's start by rethinking everything you might assume about why we drink. We usually view alcohol as a modern cultural invention, a way to unwind after a long day or to socialize with friends. But the text introduces a much deeper biological truth. Our attraction to alcohol is actually hardwired into our nervous system, stemming from a survival mechanism that is roughly 10 million years old, long before humans even existed. To make sense of this, we need to look at a simple chemical process happening out in nature. When fruit falls from a tree and sits for a few days, wild yeast begins to feed on its sugars. The natural byproduct of this process is ethanol or alcohol. As this happens, the fruit releases a very distinct, slightly sour scent into the air. Today, that smell might tell you to throw the fruit in the trash. But for an ancient primate living in a dense forest, calories were incredibly hard to come by, and competition for food was fierce. That faint scent of ethanol acted like a biological beacon. It signaled that sweet, high-calorie food was nearby. The ancestors who were most sensitive and attracted to that smell were the ones who found the fruit first, got the energy they needed, and survived to pass on their genes. So our underlying connection to alcohol did not start with a desire to catch a buzz, but with a primal need to find food. To understand the drunken monkey hypothesis, it helps to picture a prehistoric forest. When fruit overripens and falls from the canopy to the forest floor, natural yeasts begin to break down its sugars, creating ethanol in the process. For most animals, this fermented fruit is mildly toxic, and eating it would leave them sick or dangerously impaired in a world full of predators. But around 10 million years ago, our great ape ancestors began spending more time foraging on the ground, bringing them face to face with this fallen, alcoholic fruit. In a wild environment, every single calorie matters. If an animal can safely digest a rich food source that others have to leave behind, it gains a massive edge in survival. This is exactly what happened thanks to a mutation in a gene called ADH4. This mutation caused the digestive systems of our ancestors to produce an alcohol-clearing enzyme that was 40 times more efficient than the previous version. A 40-fold increase is extraordinary in evolutionary terms. It completely transformed ethanol from a harmful toxin into a manageable byproduct of a daily meal. As biologist Robert Dudley points out, this changes how we should view our relationship with alcohol. Our ancestors were not seeking out intoxication. They were simply hungry. Natural selection heavily favored the primates who could metabolize the alcohol hidden in their food, allowing them to claim valuable calories. Because those specific apes thrived, they passed that highly efficient ADH4 gene down the evolutionary tree, eventually leaving that exact same genetic fingerprint in your DNA today. Let's break down exactly what happens when your body gets efficient at processing alcohol. It is not just about avoiding sickness. When those ancient primates digested fermented fruit, their upgraded metabolism broke the alcohol down rapidly. This rapid breakdown triggered the release of dopamine, the chemical messenger that screams, "This is great for our survival, do it again." Suddenly, alcohol was not just safe to consume, it was highly rewarding. This biological quirk is the exact same hardware you carry with you today. If you have ever felt the urge to pour a drink after a long day, it can be easy to view that as a modern habit or a lack of willpower. But biologically speaking, it is an ancient survival circuit kicking into gear. Your brain is 10 million years old, and it literally cannot tell the difference between hitting the jackpot with calorie-rich, fermented fruit in a prehistoric jungle and simply opening a bottle you bought at the grocery store. The modern world changed around you, but your internal reward system stayed exactly the same. This evolutionary link, often called the drunken monkey hypothesis, perfectly explains our deep-seated biological attraction to alcohol. But it leaves us with a massive question. Enjoying fermented fruit you happen to stumble across is one thing. Actually figuring out how to manufacture alcohol on purpose, treating it as a technology, is an entirely different leap. And as the archaeological record is about to show us, our ancestors made that deliberate shift far earlier than anyone ever expected. We often learn a standard story about human history. people settled down, invented farming to secure a reliable food source like bread, and eventually figured out how to ferment the leftover grain into beer. But the discoveries at Rakefit Cave turn that traditional timeline completely upside down. It turns out that hunter-gatherers were going out of their way to harvest and process wild wheat and barley specifically to make alcohol, thousands of years before they ever planted a single seed on purpose. This flips our understanding of what actually motivated humans to invent agriculture. The beer before bread hypothesis suggests that early humans did not start farming just for basic survival or daily calories. Instead, they wanted a steady supply of beer. Fermented beverages provided safe hydration, rich nutrients, and social lubrication. The intense desire to keep that beer flowing may have been the very spark that pushed humanity to figure out how to cultivate crops. We can see the immense social power of this early beer at Göbekli Tepe. This site is famous for being incredibly old and complex, built by nomadic people who did not even have permanent homes yet. The massive stone vats found their help explain how such a huge project was even possible. Coordinating hundreds of people to carve and drag giant stone pillars is much easier if you're hosting a massive, communal feast. It suggests that the dawn of human civilization and large-scale cooperation was fueled, quite literally, by prehistoric brewing. We usually think of alcohol as a modern indulgence or a simple vice, but this text asks us to look at it through a completely different lens, as a vital piece of ancient social infrastructure. Imagine early human hunter-gatherers crossing paths with strangers. Naturally, their brains were wired to be highly vigilant and suspicious of outsiders. Alcohol, specifically the weak, naturally fermented kind they had access to, acted as a biological hack to lower that guard. It temporarily turned down the brain's threat detection system, making it possible for unfamiliar groups to sit together, trade resources, and build trust. This biological shortcut is known as the social lubricant hypothesis, and it provided a massive evolutionary advantage. By dropping those psychological walls, small, isolated family bands were able to merge into much larger communities. In the harsh ancient world, scaling up was the key to survival. Bigger, cooperative groups could share life-saving information, defend their territories, and pool their food to survive a famine. Because of this, early alcohol consumption was not just a tolerated bad habit. It was a foundational tool that actually helped build human civilization. However, the text introduces a vital catch at the end. This evolutionary success story came with strict conditions. Our ancestors spent millions of years evolving the metabolic machinery to process alcohol, but that machinery was exclusively adapted for low concentration, naturally occurring drinks consumed on an occasional, ritualistic basis. Their bodies and brains were perfectly tuned for that exact, limited exposure, which sets up a darker turn in our history when those ancient natural limits are eventually removed. For almost all of human history, nature kept alcohol consumption safely in check through a simple biological limit. The process of making alcohol relies on microscopic yeast consuming sugar, but alcohol is actually toxic to that same yeast. Once a fermented drink reaches about 12 to 15% alcohol, the yeast naturally dies off, stopping the process completely. No matter how much early humans might have wanted a stronger drink, biology simply would not allow it. That all changed around the 8th or 9th century with the invention of distillation. Originally developed for alchemy and medicine in the Islamic world, distillation allowed humans to boil and separate water from alcohol, creating highly concentrated spirits. This completely bypassed nature's built-in ceiling, introducing a level of concentrated ethanol that the human body had never encountered before. This technological leap created a massive evolutionary mismatch. Over 10 million years, our bodies and our specific alcohol processing genes evolved to safely handle the very low alcohol content found in fermenting fruit or early ancient beers, which usually hovered well under 5%. Our ancient survival software still reads alcohol as a positive signal for valuable calories and safety. But because distilled spirits are so new in the grand scheme of evolutionary history, our biology has not had time to adapt to these unnatural concentrations, causing our brain's reward system to be easily overwhelmed by a substance it was never designed to process. Think about the immense timeline of human biology. Our brains are hardwired with a 10-million-year-old reward system that evolved to seek out scarce, high-calorie foods like slightly fermented fruit. But the highly concentrated alcohol we consume today is incredibly new on the evolutionary clock. Our bodies are essentially being tricked, rewarding us heavily for consuming a potent substance that our digestive and nervous systems simply have not had the time to fully prepare for. How our bodies handle this modern substance largely depends on where our ancestors lived, because the human relationship with alcohol is not one size fits all. In regions like Europe and parts of the Middle East, humans have been producing and consuming fermented beverages for thousands of consecutive years. Because of this long, steady exposure, populations in these areas developed genetic adaptations to efficiently process alcohol. Over generations, their biology learned to tolerate it. But in East Asia, evolution took a fascinatingly different path, resulting in what is commonly known as the alcohol flush reaction. If you or someone you know gets a red face, a racing heart, or nausea from just a little bit of alcohol, this is due to a genetic variant that makes an enzyme inefficient during the second stage of breaking down alcohol. For years, scientists viewed this simply as a genetic glitch or a biological intolerance. However, recent research suggests it was actually a brilliantly protective adaptation. In ancient societies that relied heavily on a single staple crop like rice, nutritional margins were incredibly tight. Having a population impaired by heavy drinking or wasting precious grain to make rice wine was a direct threat to survival. To protect the community, evolution actively selected for this uncomfortable physical reaction. Instead of adapting for tolerance, evolution pushed for aversion, creating a built-in biological deterrent to heavy drinking based on the unique survival pressures of that environment.